Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. My name is Katrina, and I am a member of Team Remo. And we would like to welcome you to our Tearing Down Logistical Barriers for Higher Education Top Tips to Increase Your Brand Reach Within the Virtual World discussion that we're going to have today with ACE Virtual Events. But before we start, I just want to make sure, is everybody hearing me? If I'm coming in loud and clear, over on the lower right hand side are our Remojis. If you could hit a thumbs up, or if you could hit one of the clappings, so that way I know that you guys can hear me. Perfect. I see everybody's avatars changing. Awesome sauce. Thank you guys so very much. I am coming to you. It is morning time for me here in sunny San Diego, California, but I see folks coming in from all over the world. I saw some from Iraq. I saw some from South Africa, Portland, Oregon. Thank you guys for wherever you are in the world joining us today. We have a really awesome presentation for you, and we hope to give you some great ideas about how you can leverage the virtual space to further enhance your brand reach, and also to erase some of these logistical barriers that may stand in the way for a couple of the different needs that you may have as an educational institution, or as an institution in general, because I know that we have a lot of folks here from the education sector, and a few from others. So we want to give you some things to think about. So one thing to let you guys know, you can talk building by using the general chat, which is located on the right hand side of the screen. But if you have questions for us, because there is a lot of people who are in here today, if you can please put your questions into the Q&A feature. So that is on your chat panel on the right. All the way over to the right says Q&A. If you put a message in there, I'm going to give an example. Why do you like blue? I'm going to ask that question in the Q&A feature. And if you also like blue, go ahead in there and upvote that. And what that is going to do is that's going to rise that question to the top. So we know that is something that if we have a limited time with Q&A, we know that we will get to first. So that's how simple Q&A works. So what we're going to do now is jump right into things, because we have a really, really strong program for you. And we have about a half an hour of discussion. So I would like to, at this point, introduce the panelists for today, Chris Nesbit and Jonaed Iqbal. I know, Jonaed Iqbal, and he can correct me if I didn't get that right. We're going to be talking about some higher education, but a little bit about Jonaed and about Chris. Chris is the co-founder, as is Jonaed, for ACE Virtual Events, a premier virtual event management agency. Chris brings over 10 years of event marketing and design experience, and Jonaed brings over 7 years of talent management and sales experience to this discussion today. So without further ado, I would love to bring the two of you guys up. Come on up and say hi.
Hello.
Hi, Jonaed. How are you guys doing this morning, afternoon? You guys are on the East Coast, I know, right?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So do you want to talk just a couple seconds, a little bit further about who you guys are and what you do at ACE?
Yeah, of course. So ACE is, been a long time coming. We've got some really strong offerings for our customers, but we're really focused on developing a good, strong support system for our customers and providing creative solutions to a lot of different things that people want to accomplish with this particular platform, Remo. So, and anything that Jonaed has to add?
Yeah, I mean, what Chris said, we do a lot. And I think, like, one thing about ACE is we always sort of figured things out along the way, right? Chris came from like the trade show background. I came from like the education, career coaching background. But it was a new industry, right? And it's funny, before we started doing events, I actually spoke at a Remo event. I was like, this was pre-COVID. So this is like 2019, a totally different world. So we just figured things out along the way, just as the world sort of figured things out along the way. And we just kind of experimented and tested. And we're still learning a lot, right? We're still finding new use cases and new applications. So, and I think just like everyone in the audience, and we'd love to share what we learned along the way.
And part of the reasons why we asked you guys here is that you are leaders in the education sector for conducting virtual events and being in the forefront for specific use cases for higher education. So just to get into things, higher education is always actively exploring the idea of virtual and hybrid learning, connection, mentorship, sponsorship, and has been for a while, even, in the pre-pandemic world, because a lot of education moved to online platforms and take the classes as you go. And things are naturally evolving now, especially with the state of the world for the past year or so. We're going to go into some of the different event types, examples, and use cases on how virtual and hybrid connection is being implemented in higher educational institutions for things like virtual learning, faculty training, club fairs, orientations, careers and college fairs, international student alumni engagements, donor drives. I mean, there's so many practical use cases that an educational institution or even a company can explode their brand. But let's narrow down on 4 of the bigger use cases and topics. And Jonaed, I know this is in your wheelhouse, so I'm going to start with you. If we can talk recruitment. Recruitment being made easier using virtual events, especially with either limited budgets when we're in a non-pandemic world of students being able to come and do campus tours, even faculty and staff recruitments for very specific needs that a position may have. So can you talk a little bit about recruitment?
Yeah, that was actually the first reason why I got a Remo account, because I kind of saw, right, you're not doing in-person interviews, and I kind of saw like the traditional, right, one-on-one interviews. Yes, they're good for a lot of things, but if you wanted to get a lot of people in at once, a lot of these platforms, they weren't that good. Like you have to come in at a specific time, and it didn't simulate the career fair environment. Like one thing about a career fair is you kind of check out the companies that are there, you kind of wait online, and you kind of see. Now, the beauty of Remo is that we're like, all right, each table can represent a company, or it can if you're doing it for one company, each table can represent a department. And what for recruiting purposes, it's very good because you can kind of soft evaluate the candidates, right? You can kind of see who's the one asking the questions, who's stopping by, what can we do better, how can we attract more people. So that's one of the things that I think virtual events does well, right? Because before, it was so hard, and for all of you who like interviewed while working, it was always like, I have to tell them I have a doctor's appointment, or I have to cut out early on work this day, or I have to do this and that. Now it's like it's so much easier to attract more talent, and you can evaluate, right? Because so many times it's one-on-one phone screens, but now you can have in a 2-3 hour session, you can have 50 to 100 candidates, and then from there you can kind of see who you can kind of really evaluate the candidates on a much deeper level.
And then, Chris, did you have some follow-up information with that?
So this is more about the alumni meetings, but as far as career fairs in particular, we tend to see quite a high turnout, actually, which is really interesting. We've certainly talked to people who've had the opposite result on other platforms, but on our platforms, it tends to be a very high turnout, and the engagement is incredible. You see different companies engaging with each other in the chat, so they're trying to draw people to their booths, and it's very active doing it that way. And then, of course, you've got the opportunity to showcase and highlight through the presentation mode. So we get these really diverse events by utilizing the platform, which is really, really enjoyable for the attendees and for the companies or colleges.
And then on top of that, it's very good for building candidate pipelines, because sometimes you may not hire right now, but you can host these webinars, you can host these information sessions, and the best people to hire are people who are proactive in attending these sessions. You already know that they're proactive. You already know that they care. You already know that you have some brand equity with them. It's saving a lot, because yes, in a regular application, a regular interview, everybody's going to say, hey, I love your brand. They did their research. They did all that. But who's the person that showed up a few times? And you get a much better pool of candidates this way. So for building the pipelines, it's a much better way.
Mm-hmm. And what I appreciate about going virtual is, again, there's a few pain points that education services just have. You need to get students into the door. And again, the campus tour, not everyone is able to come to that campus tour. Socioeconomically, they may not be able to fly to your campus and do a campus tour. They may not be able to do multiple follow-ups, where if you do a virtual campus tour, I've even seen folks where the tour guides who would be normally with the group of kids walking around, they have a webcam and they are physically walking around in these events that are helping to recruit college students onto campus. The other thing is that I've seen is like on the opposite end of things. You know, a lot of universities, educational institutions want to place focus on getting their students internships, getting their students into their positions and matching them. So having, just like what you're talking about, those career fairs on the way out is also really important. So kind of keeping on track and on time. Let me see, we do have a question. We'll get to that question in just a minute. Next, we do have another gigantic need is alumni and alumni meetings. And we're coming into homecoming season. And quite frankly, with Delta, you know, a lot of people may not be able to come back for that homecoming experience. And that's where a lot of educational institutions really put a lot of their effort into class reunions and fundraising and fun goals. And so how are some ways and some of the things that you guys are seeing that alumni, no matter where they are in the world, can still stay engaged with their institution?
So I can speak to that a little bit. There's kind of an interesting statistic that 2017 to 2019 alumni giving was at about 8%. But it's been statistically proven that the more that alumni are engaged, the more they're willing to give and participate. So what was really interesting was last year, alumni giving skyrocketed to almost 44%. Across a lot of really high-end schools. And this is predominantly in, you know, later higher education. But that really speaks to the value of how much of an impact virtual events have on alumni engagement. Obviously, last year, there was nobody who was really thinking about going out and doing a physical engagement with the school, but there were a ton of virtual opportunities. And so, you know, those two things in conjunction with each other is really interesting. I also think it's really important to note that, you know, it's not just how the alumni engage with the school when they're not around, but it's also, you know, like faculty and things like that too. How do the faculty get trained when they can't get into the school? So there's a lot of opportunities there. But I mean, as far as like homecomings and things like that, you know, people enjoy listening to music on virtual platforms and kind of having those conversations and still being able to socialize in a way that's very similar to in person. And I think that this platform does that very well in particular.
Yeah. So in addition, someone said, did Chris say that alumni engagement skyrocketed to 40%? So to clarify, so to clarify, some schools do it really well and some schools don't. So some schools have like as low 8% tends to be like the average, but then there are selects, you know, the top schools tend to have like rates of 40%. And the difference is alumni engagement, right? And if you look at the top schools, they're like the Princeton, Harvard. Yeah, these schools have a lot of money already and they have a lot of brand equity. So what does a school do to look, if you're at 8%, even going to 16 or 20 makes a big difference. And one interesting thing is one of our first clients was my high school. And what they did is they did it for a college fair and they do it for a lot of alumni events. Because I went to a very competitive high school. So people are all over, right? A lot of people in the Bay Area, a lot of people in this. So if you want to sort of get these people together, it's very hard, right? Maybe you can get them once in 10 years coming for a 10-year reunion. I remember there were like maybe 200-300 people at our 10-year reunion. And that was like a big coordination. You're never going to get those people in a room again. But now you can get 50 to 100 people back multiple times a year.
Every
you can
6
take
months.
An hour, every 6 months, every 3 months. And my high school does like monthly events of networking nights and they do mentorship programs. And this is where you can get people who normally would never come because of logistics, of timing, their age, family obligations. They're willing to give an hour. So this is something that higher education really needs to adapt.
Another alumni, a big piece of alumni that I'm seeing, I used to work for San Diego State University as the alumni outreach and events coordinator. And one of the things that we were always looking for was for mentors and to have folks who are established in the industry to be able to mentor, you know, some of the juniors and seniors. And this is a perfect way to make those connections where you can have networking sessions, but not just standard networking sessions. It's like networking to find a mentor session. And so, you know, to be asked to be a mentor, it's a huge thing because it's you've established yourself as somebody who's knowledgeable. But with that means you're probably busy as heck.
Yeah.
So another way to leverage this logistics. So you're erasing all of those logistical barriers and all of those logistical requirements and really opening the door to facilitating some extremely meaningful relationships back and forth between your alumni and your current students.
Mm-hmm.
And then also as an alumni, like I'm a mentor for my high school. I'm doing some sessions. I have more incentive to go to a physical event because I've seen the kids who I've interacted with, and I would love to kind of go back. Whereas, you know, a lot of times before it's like, hey, do I go to an event? Are 2-3 kids showing up? Now it's like, hey, even if 2-3 kids do show up, I know which one of those 2-3 kids are showing up, and I'm so much more likely to go. Because look, I'm in New York City, right? So my high school's here, my undergrad is here, and my grad school is here. But you know, trying to get to them is like, oh, I gotta find parking, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, right? It's still logistics. Where it's like, hey, you could catch me on a random Tuesday. Like, hey, cool, I got an hour, and I'd love to talk to a couple students.
And an hour is truly an hour. I think that's really one of the most important logistical boundaries that breaks down here. You know, kind of tying it back into the point of this whole thing is that, you know, whereas before, if you, in Jonaed's case, if you needed to go downtown, 1 hour meeting to meet for coffee to have a conversation with a mentor or mentee would literally take you 2 hours to 3 hours for a 1 hour meeting. Whereas with the virtual opportunities, a 1 hour engagement is literally a 1 hour engagement. And then you go make coffee in the kitchen and you're good to go. So it saves you a tremendous amount of time and money with the tolls and parking and everything else. So magnify that on a much larger scale for, you know, educational universities and other organizations, because they have to move in hundreds of people sometimes for certain events, and all of a sudden they're paying for all those logistics costs, whereas rather than paying for maybe a subscription and some staffing. So
well, and that's a good segue into the next that we're talking about is paying for staffing or paying for, you know, people coming in. Another great way that a virtual adoption for universities is for geopolitical barriers. My story is that I started at Harvard, not the smart people's Harvard, but at the artistic people's Harvard. I was a theater master's program, and I left to go to the Moscow Art Theater, and that's where I got my master's degree. But you know, every year it was a challenge. I know that my professors had to get their visas and get their travel plans and get everything housing situated to come in back to the United States to teach. And you know, in the world that we're in right now, the geopolitical situation changes constantly. COVID is in various stages all over the world. People are locked down, they're open. They're locked down, they're open. Restrictions traveled here and there. Talk just for a second about how we can remove some of these geopolitical barriers, because you know the pandemic has created a whirlwind, and I think Chris, would you like to tackle this one?
I can, yeah. So this is one of my personal favorite components of a virtual versus a brick and mortar event. You know, our experience has been that you're able to attract much greater talent when the restrictions and the cost associated with it, the time constraints are not involved. So if you were to reach out to some high profile person and, you know, tell them that it would take them a week round trip and we'll put you up in a hotel, great, you know, but you get to visit New York and all these things. But it's really that 1 week component that's really a problem, and all the travel that's associated with that, and the expense and lost opportunities, maybe just the amount of time that's involved. However, with a virtual situation, we found that they're much more willing and at a much lower cost, not just from the travel and logistics standpoint. Some of these universities and colleges do pay for the speakers that they have come in and engage with their students. So that cost, just the speaker fee, is lower as well, if not free in a lot of cases. So, you know, I mean, that's a huge logistical barrier that's just torn down. And now you're not necessarily limited to the US. If we're having issues where we can't travel, you're also expanding it out to Europe and some of the other countries that may have really intelligent people that would do a wonderful job teaching your students about something that's valuable. And you could have 2 or 3 people, so you get a broader perspective. So there's a lot of advantages to, you know, reaching outside of what you might normally have had access to with a physical event.
Yeah. In addition to that, you also get some events. So I'm going to kind of go back to like college fairs, right? So my high school had a college fair, and they actually had more colleges attend during the online, because what happened was they were like, hey, normally they didn't have the budget to fly out their staff. They didn't, hotel, NYC is expensive. Now you had these colleges come in, and the staff liked it more because some, at my school, all the kids went to like the Harvard, the Yale, right? They went to those tables, and then some smaller colleges didn't have as many, but they liked it because the 2 or 3 students that did come by, they could actually have meaningful conversations. So, and then now it's like you build relationships, you build pipelines, you build partnerships, and this is like very important. And then also you have like the freshman orientation, right? That's like the first time. Now the thing is, you can do it way earlier. So you can do it like, hey, this is a virtual freshman orientation. Now this is the in-person. Because what I found is with virtual, it's like you meet people virtually, and then now you look forward to the physical event much more, because before it's random. It's like, is it worth going? Is it not worth going? But even if you meet 1 or 2 friends during a virtual event, you're like, hey, I want to see Chris. I want to see Katrina at this event. And I know, right? That's all you really need.
And I do think it's much easier to engage with people in a virtual capacity first. I don't think that it's as scary, and you can go over to a table, and if you really don't like it, you just click out. I mean, that's a huge factor for people who may not be extroverts and naturally able and ready to go out there and engage with people. Maybe they're a little bit introverted and they want to actually meet people from all over the world before they go and step into this scary big place that they've never experienced before, and it gives them a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a safety net there.
In addition, from an accessibility and socioeconomic standpoint, the rich kids have never had issues with campus tours, right? Their parents can take off time from work, they can fly, they can afford, they can do that. Now you have accessibility to some very smart kids who can actually sort of experience a campus tour that's more personal, right? While virtual, they can kind of see, they can have a better idea, and they can really talk to students. So I think just opening up, right, higher education just to serve a broader audience.
And that opens also to international students. So I know that we have, raise your hand if you're outside the United States. I know we have some folks from South Africa. I know that I saw from Iraq. I know that we had some folks from Japan. So the raise hand feature is just down below. My daughter is a freshman. She's starting high school here next week. And we're already getting emails from the school about virtual recruitment. And it's a school in the UK. And I think that's amazing, because as an undergrad, I never even considered that going outside of the United States for my education could be a possibility. And the same thing is like just removing all of those barriers. We have some Cyprus, from Brazil. It really does open the mind and the expansion. And speaking from folks here, because we're all in the United States, like, not a lot of United States citizens have passports because they don't understand the opportunity, and everybody wants to come to the US. So I was a weird duck. I left the US for my grad school because I found better opportunities, but I wouldn't have known about them necessarily otherwise. So I think this is a very, very great platform in the virtual sector. There's so many things that you can do to really, really expand your reach. And then, the last piece that we're going to talk about really quickly is academia. And I'm not necessarily talking about academia by replacing Blackboard or replacing, like, this is how we're delivering some of our learning management systems, but you can eventually move into that with a replacement. But where the virtual really, really comes into play is connecting folks on a social level. So whether you are a solid 100% online institution of higher, or if you are a brick and mortar full time, you're still going to have students who are remote learners, or who are not staying there natively on campus and may not be able to come back to campus because you have childcare obligations or you have work obligations. So really connecting students and connecting the campus life together. Jonaed, can you talk a little bit about some of the virtual and hybrid environments that can benefit academia itself?
So I just kind of want to change a perception. I know you're mentioning student a lot, and a lot of times we think of students as like 18 to 24-year-old, but what's rising is the rise of the adult student, right? That a student can be, you have these people who are going back to school 30 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus, and now it's more accessible to them because they can't afford to take off work 2-3 years, but they can't afford to take class, right? You have like these micro credentials, you have these, you know, small programs where you take 2 classes a semester and you have a certificate after a year. So you're opening up accessibility, and these people love virtual, right? They need the flexibility, right? Because they have so many lifestyle obligations. They don't have the flexibility of the younger students. So this really opens it up a lot for them, right? They have more access to the professors, they have more access to the faculty. This is something that, and these people generally have more money, right? And when they go to school, they're going for a very specific reason, right? And they know why they're spending it. Whereas the younger students, sometimes they have a little less direction. So that social aspect, I think, just bringing people together, and you're more likely to go to the school where there is some social aspect, right? These people still want that social aspect, because one of the big benefits of school is the network that you have. So how do you nurture that network in a changing environment, right? Because work is changing, a lot of things are changing. I think that you really have to utilize these things and cater to just all the different types of students that are sort of entering the college system.
And one big thing that we've talked about, and to be honest, here at Remo, I've given Tuesday, I did a master class on poster sessions, whiteboarding for poster sessions, and I've done three really strong sessions for poster boarding, because we're finding that is getting such an amazing boost by going virtual, because now you can reach peers that you otherwise could not have reached. You can reach funders that you couldn't have reached. You can reach, you know, experts who are in the field. So we're here I'm in San Diego, and there's an expert in the field who's in India. And now I can do so much more with my research and expand it out. So I'm seeing poster sessions really on the rise virtually. Is there anything else that you guys are seeing that is included, that universities, higher education, that they're running for students that have virtual aspects?
Well, oh, go ahead.
Chris, you go. No, Chris, you go.
I was actually going to pivot a little bit. I mean, yes, there are definitely certain things like poster sessions that are very good for students, but I definitely wanted to touch on something, you know, that we've seen recently. We participated in a very large faculty training very recently. And they brought in professors from all over the country. This is a very large university. And they ran a week-long, basically, workshop, 12 hours a day, 5 days. And it was very intensive. And they were able to split up the sections and split up the teams and do some really interesting things with, you know, physical props that they shipped out to people. And then they had people from all over the country utilizing these props in a virtual environment. And they had like this pathway that they needed to complete in order to get their certification at the end. And I think that was a really powerful application in a virtual environment that had incredible results. One of the things that they told us in the debriefing of the event itself was that they are actually considering moving this 100% in the future, even after everything goes back to being normal, right? That they're considering to do this long term, because one, the cost savings, and two, the engagement that they received was different, as well as all the logistical battles that have been, you know, put to rest, and they can move on. So I certainly think that that's really valuable. I've also seen the poster sessions being a big component. I think that the ability to pair things like with the whiteboard and the flexibility to move around and explore on your own terms, and you know, again, you know, coming back to our whole point of the conversation today is tearing down those logistical barriers. We're able to bring in people from all over the world to give the broadest experiences possible, and people are excited. You know, hey, Harvard called and said, hey, you know, I want to be a part of your poster session. Well, you know, before you would have had to fly in to do that. Now you don't. So
yeah. And another thing that I would say is the conferences. So I hope no one gets mad, I actually went to an in-person conference, right? So a little Remo betrayal right there. But the thing is, you know, I had to like change all my meetings, because I made all my meetings like not on those days of the conference. So I had to like really, and I couldn't really do much during the days of the conference. So now the thing is, these virtual conferences just make it so much easier that, hey, if you need an important meeting, you could put in the middle, you're not losing like the time after, and it's logistically and the accessibility wise so much easier.
Yeah. And we can continue these topics like all day, every day. And honestly, we are going to continue.
Okay.
So next month, this time next month, we will have a further discussion about tearing down logistical barriers and go a little bit deeper into alumni engagement. So we're going to invite you back for that. We'll be pushing out that information. But I want to switch over to Q&A right now. So we do have some questions, and while I do that, I'm going to bring up Sammy Hero is another one of Team Remo, so I'm going to bring him up because he has his hand raised. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the discussion. And while Sam is coming up, I'm going to say hello to Sam, and I'm going to throw a question at him here shortly. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the, even though I'm wearing a wrong branded t-shirt, but I'm the brand new CRO for Remo, based in Finland.
Nice to meet you, Sammy.
Very first question, Sammy, is Remo considering a special pricing plan for higher education?
Well, that's an obvious question. Of course, the answer is yes. And we're also working right now finalizing our new pricing plans, which should actually make it a lot more attractive for higher ed and overall for annual subscriptions compared to what we've done in the past.
All right, and this actually leads me into the next couple questions. Someone is asking, are we able to share video? So thank you very much for that explanation, Sammy. And yes, you are able to share video. And are you able to share slides? That you can. And as we do that, I'm going to share my screen while I ask you, Chris, because this is your wheelhouse, can you create a floor plan to make it look more like your campus logo and colors? So if you give me 2 seconds, Chris, I am pulling up that web page.
Okay.
So I'm sharing my screen now, and can you talk about I think we're asking about custom floor plans.
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot of flexibility in the floor plan world. You can do like we have here, which is called the event today is called an isometric. You've also got these photorealistic 3-dimensional ones. These are becoming the most popular coming out of our company. We've also got the 2D top-down, very focused dimensional, and typically very brand-focused type floor plans. We're seeing less and less of the overview floor plans, but we can work from photographs. We've also we've done quite a bit, and there's a lot of flexibility there. We just have a few constraints that we have to work within. But I think that the 3D ones there that you see are really interesting because people really know what's going on when they get into a space. They see a set of chairs and a table, and it's got all the shadows and the perspective and everything. It really just draws them in psychologically, and then they hit the ground running a lot faster. So that's what we like.
Katrina, can you scroll down? So you see the one with the purple chairs, and scroll down a little more. Yeah, and you see that one. So the green, the purple-ish green. So we kind of. So one of the events I did for my high school, we kind of did like a branded environment, and what they felt was since it was virtual for so long, they felt like they were actually back in the school building, right? Like we had the colors of the high school, we had it as the branding of the high school. So you can do it, and people like it. So think about your virtual tours, right? You can make it have the campus feel, right? You can have it replicate like a famous campus building so that when they come in, they feel like they're already there. And then when they come in and they see it in person, it's just another wow factor. So you can 100% do it. If it's possible, Chris can do it. I just say yes.
We are currently actually doing a replication of somebody's atrium, their center atrium for the university, fully perspective driven with balconies and all kinds of different things. So yeah, the possibilities are endless, and these are not even the extent of how far we can push it.
I'm going to stop sharing here for once. And I've actually worked with UCLA, and UCLA had some alumni class reunions, and they recreated their campus with their main campus building in the UCLA colors. And then they had everybody gather, and then they had additional buildings that they broke out. So the class of 1980 went to their own building, 81 went to a building, 82 went to a building. So there's a lot that folks can do with, like I said, the rise of Facebook has really demolished having in-person class reunion. So this is a further way. We do have a question about, is the session going to be recorded? Yes, it's going to be recorded. We have a question about, as you dive deeper into higher education in the future, is there any plan to cover orientation, transition, and retention? I want to make sure that I understand that question. So whoever asked that question, if you want to come up, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm thinking you may be talking about like orientation, like freshman orientation or HR orientation.
So we did it for like my high school. We do like the orientation for the next class, like they're coming in. So here's the thing, like my high school is in the Bronx and a lot of people live in Queens. So for a lot of parents, it's like they got to take the day off work. A lot of students, it's like a long commute. Now what happens is they can kind of do the orientation. They can have someone there, right? They can still do the physical, right? But they have just more options. And you look at any organizations, the more options you have, the more you cater to different segments of customers. There's some that want to fly in. There's some that are already sold and they're like, hey, I know what I want to do. I just need some more info. There's some earlier in the cycle. There's some later in the cycle. So having these virtual options just gives you so much more flexibility. A lot of people think like virtual is like a replacement, right? It's not. It's a supplement, and most people think it's like one or the other, but it's like both. You want to have both as part of your strategy, because it's like now you have the emails of the people who attended. You know how long, who engaged, who asked the questions. Now from there, you can have custom things like, hey, it does make more sense to invest in this demographic as opposed to sort of trying to blanket out, send out these mailers. Right now, people come in and send out a custom mailer to those people, right? And retention is, again, it's so much easier when there are more options, right? They kind of have more engagement, they have more interaction, and it's all about, building that community, right? That's all. It always comes back to, regardless of what you do, higher education, you need to build that community among the students. And if you do that, you will get what you want, right? You will get an engaged class, you will get networking, and you will get more donations, allowing you to do more of these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. The next question is there a planned integration between Remo and Blackboard? As of now, I don't know that we have that on our roadmap, but luckily Sammy Hero and I are both here and we are hearing this question.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I'd be super happy to hear from the person who asked that question, because I had that particular conversation this morning with our head of product strategy, and we're talking about particularly Blackboard, but because there's a standard for integration with those different kind of content management, curriculum management tools, it wouldn't be too difficult. So we'd love to talk more about it, whoever wants to participate, because kind of the use case and how we would actually do the integration.
Yeah. And how Chris and I have always managed it, if there's not an integration for something, we figure out how to integrate it.
Pieces.
So for example, like Blackboard has like, the things, and you could say, hey, weekly office hours here, and you have the Remo link, right? So there are many ways to sort of incorporate it without it being like a direct integration. And that's like where we excelled as an organization. It's like before there was an integration, we figured out how to integrate it. And it's all about just being creative.
And that's great. That's another really, really big popular use case that I'm hearing as well is office hours. Is that the professors need to have office hours. But again, it's this socialization, human connection aspect, not necessarily the straight education learning. It's expanding beyond virtual use for that. It's expanding now into how can we really bring people together in an active format that's not like Zoom is very passive. Zoom is like I push a button and I just sit there and I get drugged where I want to go, and
it's like getting trapped in a black box.
Yeah. Next is so as you can tell by the bar at the very top, so I had my timer going. Our timer session for Q&A is done, but there's 2 more questions in here that we can talk to. But before I answer them, if there are deeper questions that you would like to ask to Christopher, Jonaed, myself, a member of the Remo staff, we are going to go back into conversation mode here in a minute for some networking. The building is open till at least 11:15 a.m. Pacific, so please don't make me do public math wherever you are. I do not excel in public math.
28 minutes.
So yes, so we can potentially extend it if people want to stay, so that's not a problem. When it talks about accessibility, what features and options does Remo have to support bilingual events as well as event attendees with disabilities? I have one of the largest events that I do personally is the largest job fair for individuals with disabilities in the Southern California region. And so we have come up with a lot of, like, as Jonaed said, is if there's something not inherent, we figure out how to make workarounds. So there are folks in the marketplace. So we have a Remo marketplace that will do live translations for bilingual events, and they have an app that they can help use. There are some integrated aspects of Google Chrome for accessibility that are phenomenal when it comes to doing live AI captioning. But Sammy, we announced this at our meet and greet a couple weeks ago. Do you want to talk about anything that we have coming up as far as integrated ADA capabilities?
All I can say right now is that we're working super hard.
Oh, I think Sammy may have.
We're working on just figuring out which parts of it we will support it, and typically it's like a screen readers and aids for the visually impaired that we tend to focus on, but just making sure that our platform seamlessly with them. And of course, the transcription will, the real-time transcription of the videos will definitely help.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I did notice is that our whiteboard partner is Miro, and Miro is going to be a huge household name because they are also integrated with Zoom now, and they have just rolled out functionalities for screen readers. So screen readers require some HTML coding that's not inherent in the build with Remo, so that's where we have to look at some of those things. But I am personally researching, and we're going to have a lot of information in our community. So we have a Remo community at Remo-revolution.mn.co. So Remo Revolution in the Mighty Networks is a very robust community where we have these discussions. So as we have more discoveries and more expansions of what we can do, we even have an entire section just on disability and accessibility inside that community. So with that being said, we have a last question of, can Remo be used to deliver trading courses? I'm not familiar with the term trading courses.
I mean, I think they mean when it comes to stocks and stuff. And I think Remo is very good at being exceptional, because look, you can use any webinar platform to do webinars, right? But what makes courses good is when you get the student interaction and you get the small student interaction, right? Because you can't have a group of 20 students interacting. What's going to happen is you have like two or three students talking, and that's it. Now you can split them out into groups, and you can talk about, hey, here's the, I don't know, the bonds table. Here's the auto stock table. Here, the high growth stock table. Here, the low growth, right? And the different trading strategies. So you can, again, it's all about being creative and using the functionality in a manner. And in addition to the ADA stuff, it's like oftentimes when we work with people and clients who care about that, it's like if they can get it on video, we can figure out how to integrate the video within Remo. Like just like the ManyCam allows you to put the video into ManyCam and then come out over here. So there are ways, right, that if you can get on YouTube, you can stream the YouTube in here if you can use another platform. So we're always cognizant of these things. And a lot of times ADA, physical is another thing, right? Like I remember I went to school with someone, like when I went to Columbia and someone was in a wheelchair, he had to go through these underground tunnels and stuff, and he had to have a day mapped, right? Now it's like he doesn't have to, right? That he doesn't have to do that with the Remo event. It's just, all right, double click, right? He can do it in an environment that works best for him, because I just know how hard it is for people with physical disability, even having a cane, right? Walking from one side of the campus to the other, and you only have 10 minutes. It's like tough. Like, hey, I can't make this event because it's like my next class starts at this, or I have to leave the event early and I can't network.
Yeah. And we've had individuals in some of our events where they can't double click, and there's a feature where you can pull people to where they need to go if they can single click. So we can have a lot of these great conversations down in the table mode. And as a great lead in, because we do have tables set up with table names and conversation mode, that if you would like network and discuss one of the topics that we talked about. We have tables set up for academia, geopolitical barriers, alumni, and recruitment. So if you'd like to brainstorm ideas with us or with other members, we're going to have some representatives for Remo. If you'd like to talk more specifically about Remo and the platform, we would love to do that. But I do want to get down into conversation mode so that you guys can have some time to be able to talk. One last thing is, has platform been used for graduate medical education recruitment in the past? Yes. I have seen all sorts of education recruitment, graduate medical, undergraduate. So there are a lot of great ideas and concepts. And the great thing is if you have the question, if you have the ability, we have the answer. So we're going to go ahead and go down to conversation mode. And thank you guys so much for being here. I'd like to thank you, Chris. I'd like to thank you, Jonaed. I'd like to thank you, Sammy, for being here and for relaying all this great information. Join us, Chris, Jonaed, and myself, back again next month, where we'll dive a little bit deeper into alumni and some of the more specifics where we can get deeper into that area of use for virtual. So thank you, everybody.
All right.